KLEAN Radio starts now.
Hey, welcome to KLEAN Radio. I'm Andrew Spanswick, your co-host with my other co-host, Judah Friedman.
Well, two co-hosts together make one host.
We can have 1,000 co-hosts.
Yes.
Yes, but it's just the two of us.
Yeah, we're complete.
That's right.
Yeah, the perfect symmetry.
So welcome to KLEAN Radio. We're here talking about addiction and recovery issues. We welcome calls here at the station. The number here is
888-539-2980. That's 888-539-2980.
We welcome your calls. We're here to talk about problems that you might be having or problems that you might be having in your family or with a friend.
And the hope and the, of sober people out there.
Absolutely. We're also here just to talk about topics that are pertinent today with regards to addiction recovery. And we have a great guest on this show today. We'll be coming in about 5 or 10 minutes. His name is Jamison Monroe, and he is the owner and CEO of Newport Academy.
Oh.
And they treat adolescents and teens, unlike KLEAN, who works with adults. So it's going to be a good mix.
Yeah, and it's a favorite thing of mine is teenagers in trouble, and teenagers going through a rough time in the legal way, of course.
We're going to take that the correct way.
Yeah, the correct way. And I have a fondness for teenagers because I was sober young. I got sober when I was 22, and my teens were pretty gnarly with addiction, with alcoholism, and I have a place in my heart. And it's something that we speak about a lot, and I think it's a really interesting topic we'll probably talk to Jamison about, is this tough love thing.
Yep.
And, with teenagers, to people out there that are listening, a lot of people are going through a rough time, and Andrew and I both pretty much agree on this, that, you giving tough love to a drug addict probably isn't always the best thing.
Yeah, and this is obviously a family illness. So often we have a situation where parents have addiction problems along with the children. So, and as I'm sure we're going to hear from Mr. Monroe here, Jamison Monroe.
You could call him Mr. Jamison.
I can call him Mr. That's
Mr. Jamison.
That's very Southern,
yes,
right?
That is.
I'm slipping.
It sort of works with the name, though. It does work with the name. But yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting thing because my father used to say, as long as I was alive, there was a chance. And when you talk about addiction and people want to always have consequences, I think in the 90s, you could probably, who are you, by the way? You're a healthcare professional. You've been doing this for 22 years.
22 years, yeah, working in the field of mental health.
So you actually have a little, so when did that whole thing of consequences, giving addicts consequences?
Well, I think there's always been the issue of consequences stemming from moralistic and religious points of view.
Right.
Sin having the consequence of going to hell. And that's been a moral stance throughout history. So we see a lot of that. When we enter into sort of more of a medical way of looking at things, and addiction being a disease, then we start looking at how do we treat people? What are the different ways of dealing with things other than consequences, but maybe helpful interventions and therapies and ways of working with people to resolve problems, not just having behavioral consequences to the problem. Now, with adolescents, and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit, there are behavioral types of treatment.
Right.
And behavioral modification has been a form of treatment for adolescents for a long time. And I'm very interested to hear how Newport Academy uses or integrates behavior modification into their treatment.
Because here's my question. How do you give a consequence to somebody that's killing themselves? What do you, if somebody's out there shooting drugs, if somebody's out there abusing, what exactly is the consequence? Because they're willing to die.
Well, we're also, when we talk about that, we talk about enabling, right? Or people doing things that enable people to continue behavior that's killing them. And so there's consequences that sometimes happen, not getting money, not being supported, not being enabled to continue to use that drug or alcohol.
So we have a lot of people out there that are listening that are scared. It's very scary when you think about enabling, and we've had callers with the mother that her son was addicted to pot. Mm-hmm. And she was scared to kick him out of the house or she was scared to raise the consequences because she was scared that he would run away.
Right.
So a lot of times people continue enabling. Addicts have an amazing ability to make people continue enabling.
Well, they're very manipulative.
Right. And they become major hostage takers.
Yeah, I think that people that are active in their addiction often become very manipulative out of a need to try and get what they need.
Right.
Which is they believe they need more drugs and alcohol. Or in sometimes cases money for gambling or continued behavioral issues where they're overeating or what have you. So
you're listening to KLEAN Radio Live, by the way. The number here is 888-539-2980. That's 888-539-2980. You're listening to KLEAN Radio. You can find us on Facebook at KLEAN Radio. Like us. You could also watch our show right now. We're live streaming at KLEANradio.com. That's KLEAN Radio with a K, KLEANradio.com. Something very interesting, we're going to get into this with our guest, is we were talking about a lot of people out there, and we encounter this all the time when you say to people, when people call up for treatment, the first thing they say is, how much is it?
Right.
It's like they have somebody dying to their right, and all they want to do for that moment is get them help, and then you say it's this amount of money. It could be $10,000 to $30,000, it could be $5,000, whatever it is, they hear that fee. But if that same person was next to them calling them up and said, oh my God, this guy's having a heart, somebody's having needs a heart transplant, you wouldn't flinch.
Yeah.
With the price.
Yeah. I still think there's a large component where people feel that for whatever reason that people that become addicted and are addicts have a moral responsibility for that behavior. And there's a lot of anger and resentment towards people that have become addicted and the behaviors that they tend to engage in to support their habit. And also the damage that it just causes all around for family members. So getting past that resentment and trying to deal with people still. And also, as we see dual diagnosis issues of mental health problems mixed in with addiction, then it becomes even more complicated.
Which is a very interesting thing, and I think that's important that you talk about that because that's something you deal with at KLEAN is dual diagnosis.
Yeah, we're very strong believers that there are a lot of underlying psychiatric conditions that exist side by side with most addictions. And we like to talk about that. And I think that's something that people should call in and talk about if they're struggling with depression and self-medicating with alcohol. Or
especially people that are sober. People that are sober 5 years, 10 years constantly face depression in sobriety.
Yep.
And it's very scary to talk about. It's one of those scary things I had to talk about. I had to learn how to deal with my own depression. And I was scared. I was scared to walk into 12-step meetings and say, I'm depressed.
Yeah, and people that relapse, you see often they relapse from major depression or a lot of anxiety or a lot of stress, and then they feel hopeless about getting sober again. And I think, unfortunately, AA tends to reinforce that because they put so much emphasis on how long have you been sober. And I think that
they're also limited in what they can do.
Yeah, and I think that some of that should be de-emphasized and that we should limit how long people relapse for and try and get them back into a state of being healthy and being sober. So
okay, the number here again, it's 888-539-2980. That's 888-539-2980. And what's the emergency number? If people that are out there driving, we understand this is a really hard topic to talk about. What's that number?
Yeah, I mean, if people don't want to call the show but would like to get help, I encourage them to call. We have people that are working at our treatment center that will take your call. It's completely confidential, and you can speak to them. You won't be on the radio. And you can call them at 888-601-6040. It's 888-601-6040. And you can also just go to KLEANcenter.com. It's KLEAN with a K. And you can look up everything on the website about what we do.
And you're a real trooper, by the way, tonight. You just got off a plane. You're dealing with illness, so...
Yeah, there's a lot of flu going around.
There's a lot of flu going around. That's why I tell everybody to get the flu shot.
I know our producer's out with the flu. We've got two of our major counselors, unfortunately, are also out with the flu, and I've been struggling with it for the past week.
I think a year you've been struggling with it. You're just like constantly you have like one flu, like the strain that never leaves.
I'm around a lot of sick people. I don't know.
You are.
It's all the hospitals that go visit.
That's true. That's why I don't go to hospitals.
Yes.
Although I did meet my girlfriend in the emergency room.
Well, there you go.
And you know what's funny?
You were whining about something? Were you really sick, though? Or
no, I wasn't bringing myself.
It wasn't just hypochondria.
I brought a girl in.
Okay. Yeah.
It is. It's a great place. The emergency room is a better place to pick up women because they're vulnerable.
Right. I can't
and
have
you're a guy. You're like the knight in shining armor. You're there at the hospital to help people out. You look great. And so I think
I am impressed though that that's what it took to get a girlfriend, that you were willing to hang out in an ER. You're like an ambulance chaser
for 15 hours. I'm a girl chaser in an ER.
Wow.
Hey now.
Wow.
And she wanted to celebrate our anniversary. We're coming up on a year. She wanted to celebrate it in Lucy's at Cedars-Sinai. And I was like,
wow,
no.
you're going to have like a picnic dinner
at Cedars-Sinai Medical
Cedars-Sinai
Center.
in the ER.
I was like, let's just go to the Starbucks where we had a coffee.
I don't know if I would trust you to. Thank God he's not the one that that we're working on.
Yes, and in the studio tonight, we have Jamison Monroe, founder and CEO of the Newport Academy. Welcome to KLEAN Radio.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, welcome. We're going to get into what you're going on, but we got a call that came in really quickly we're going to take real quick. On line one, we got Jim from North County, San Diego. How are you doing tonight? You're on KLEAN Radio.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good. How are you, Jim?
What's going on?
Good. I'm just trying to find a way to get my son some help. He just got out of jail last week. Had multiple issues with drugs and drinking, mostly binge drinking. He's 21 years old, and we've tried everything. I was listening to your comments about being enabling, and I think we've tried so often to help him and try to live a normal life, but he keeps falling back into the same behaviors, and it's led to jail time now, and we're just beside ourselves what to do with him. How do we cut him off?
Yeah, I think first of all, thank you for calling, Jim, and we understand the struggle and anger and sometimes frustration and pain that can go with dealing with a child who's now an adult, actually at 21, and the efforts and the frustrations to help them. And when you get to the point that the criminal justice system's involved, it becomes especially difficult because the consequences can be so much more severe and financially draining as well. I guess, Judah, this is really a call for you. Judah, this is Judah's life. I mean,
Jim, I was 22 when I got sober. Now, from 18 to 22, I was in about 6 rehabs, detoxes, half sober livings. And my father used to say, as long as my son is alive, there's a chance, right? So what that meant was my father wouldn't give me money. My father used to say, I'm not going to give you the car because I'm not going to give you a weapon. But as long as I called him up and said, I need help, my father would put me in a rehab. Did we lose Jim? And
I'm sure he's listening.
Yeah, Jim, if we lost you, call us back. But that's and Jamison, who's sitting next to me, obviously, you also got sober very young.
I got sober at 24.
Right.
But yeah, from 17 to 24, I was in a number of different rehab centers. I was arrested 6 times.
Wow.
Didn't spend more than a day or two in jail at a time, which I'm fortunate for.
There's a big difference between 2 and 1, by the way.
There is a huge difference. Right. Yeah, and there's a huge difference between city jail and county jail. And thank God I never was transferred over to county. I was in the holding cell about to go, and they didn't call my name because my mother was there to pick me up.
She bailed you out?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
We're both blessed. And it's amazing. I one time got into a horrific car accident in Florida, and my parents called the wrecker, the people that pick up your car and you sign over the car. And literally it was the next day the car that I got in an accident with was gone. And that really summed up so much of the enabling that had gone on was that it was like it didn't happen.
Right.
And that was enabling. I don't think, though, I think them offering me a constant ability to go to rehab was not enabling.
Well, what level of willingness do you guys think needs to occur for someone who's, that age for them to really get help?
I mean, really quick on Judah's point, though, is like there's a line between enabling and then getting treatment. Right. It's like that at the end of the road, that's the only thing that you should be offering your loved one is like, I'm not going to give you any of the car or money or anything like that. I will give you treatment. I'll give you hope and I'll give you help, that. But willingness is an interesting question because if you look at a lot of the data, it does show that motivation to enter treatment has no effect on long-term outcomes. So if you can get someone into treatment and keep them into treatment, the theory is that the light bulb can come on. And you guys work in treatment, you guys know, and I work with teenagers. I'd say 2/3 to 3/4 of the kids that come in, they don't want to be there, and they come kicking and screaming, right? But something happens in treatment.
That shift.
That shift can occur, and once you're sober for a week, 2 weeks, a month, a couple months, you start thinking a little clearer, and you start doing some of that work, and you see the light.
And it also, an amazing thing that it does is going to treatment and going, with whatever age really is, you might not stay sober. And it's something we talk about a lot on the show is, I don't want to say relapse is part of recovery, although the biggest book in AA was written by a relapser. that you never know when the miracle is going to come. And I had a drug counselor in Israel who used to take us to these concerts, and I've spoken about this before. He would take us to like Radiohead and REM, and he would take us all over, and he used to say to me, "You'll never be able to say it wasn't fun." And yeah,
we actually got Jim back on the line. Hey, Jim, how you doing?
Yeah, hey guys. Sorry, I got cut off there briefly.
That's okay.
What I was saying is one of the things that we're doing with my son, who just got out of jail, is we're going to AA with him, and I'm supporting him. I don't drink very much, but I just decided to quit because he's come back to live in my home. But I'm so concerned about him relapsing and what to do with him. He's like I said, he just got out of jail, but he certainly displays a propensity to relapse and get right back into the same behaviors. And I'm very concerned that although he seems to be taking AA very well, he tends to minimize it. I guess as a young man, I think they think they're invincible, and that's a real difficult thing to overcome. And I just don't see that he believes it's as serious as his family views it to be. So I'm just worried that he needs to be in some sort of residential program or something like that. Well, what can you suggest?
Well, I think that residential programs are good at containing people and giving people an opportunity to actually concentrate on getting sober. It is very tough, I think, especially when people are young and they have a lot of peer pressure, and they do have that feeling that their life is, it's too early in life to give up all the opportunities that they think of partying, going out, drinking, meeting women, whatever. And that so much of that's glamorized in the media that they feel like, oh, I'm going to be 40 and I'm going to do it right now.
That was my plan.
Yeah, right. So it's tough, and I think that as we were just talking about a few minutes ago, that if getting into treatment and you can get into a residential treatment program, that actually gives you a better opportunity to stop drinking, because it gives you that time. It gives you sort of like a buffer where you're exposed to not just AA, which is part of getting sober, but for a lot of people, but also all the other types of treatments and opportunities and insights that can be delivered by qualified treatment professionals. What would you say?
I think a lot of kids today almost view the jail time as a badge of honor. In some sense, and I don't know if they really view the seriousness of their behaviors and actions as much as others do.
Jim, but this is Judah. I'm going to say this: the best thing in the world for your son would be to get into treatment right now. But the best thing for you would be to get help yourself. Yeah, and would be to go to meetings like Al-Anon while your son's in treatment and get therapy, because he's holding your life hostage right now.
Yes,
and that's his job. That's what he does. That's what addicts do. They're hostage takers. And your job right now is to get him in a safe place, if you can, and to get yourself in a safe place too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because that's where we feel helpless.
Right.
We don't feel like we have any power to change his behavior, and he's old enough that he could walk away from any treatment, and we have to be accepting of that he may leave, and we may just have to live with that.
I'm going to tell you just
I was going to say that. I was going to echo what you were saying. That's where Al-Anon comes in as a big part of being a parent. And there are parent-only Al-Anon meetings where you go and you've got 40, 50, 60 other parents that are in the same shoes as you are in now, or they're a year out, they're 2 years out, or they're a month out, and their kid's in treatment, and they're practicing. You guys were referencing tough love earlier, but they're practicing that, we're going to provide you treatment, but if you leave, you can't come home, and it's really tough.
Not just their children, but other family members. I mean, we tend to see a lot of addiction stem throughout entire families. Not always, but but it never hurts to learn a lot of these basic skills about what you can change and what you can't change, what your responsibilities are and what they aren't, and then also just basic skills for daily living and how to handle stressful situations.
Right.
I think that guilt and shame are two big feelings that go along, not with just the person that's using,
with the parents even more.
The parents even more, yeah. And, you might, a lot of with adolescents, a lot of what you see is in young adults is that the behavior that they react to you with, that they're invincible, that they don't care, that they think that there isn't a problem. A lot of that is covering up a lot of deep-seated emotional pain that they're feeling. most people that are drinking and using drugs are trying to cover up something that's really deeply wrong. I'm a strong believer that there's some underlying issue that hasn't been addressed or is too painful to be addressed or isn't being addressed properly at this point.
It says that in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous on page 64. It says our liquor was but a symptom. We had to get down to the causes and conditions, right?
Exactly.
So liquor's the drinking is the coping mechanism trying to cover up that deeper-seated issue, which needs to be addressed by a professional.
And Jim, what saved my family was them going to Al-Anon. I kid you not when I say this. I used to tell my parents that it cost $10 to go to meetings when I was drinking, and they used to believe me. And when I got sober this time, they had gone to Al-Anon and they had found out that it's free to go to meetings, so I didn't even have my drinking money anymore. And my father used to give me like $1.50 to get a token to Manhattan, $1.50 back, and a couple dollars maybe for coffee. But my parents started to get healthy, and that really bothered me in the beginning. I had so many resentments. I was like, now my parents are healthy and I'm sick.
It's like the gig's up.
Yeah,
you know.
But Jim, I beg of you to get your son into a treatment center and get yourself help. We could help you with that if you're interested.
Yeah, Jim, if you want to call our back line, it's 888-601-6040, and you can also look it up on KleanCenter.com. And we have a treatment professional there that can answer your call and help you in a variety of ways.
What's that number again?
It's 888-601-6040, and also KleanCenter.com. And I really wish you the best of luck, and thank you for listening and calling in.
Thanks so much, guys.
And please, get any help you need.
Great.
Let's
give out the number again. KLEAN Radio.
You're listening to KLEAN Radio. That's KLEAN with a K. The number here is 888-539-2980. That's 888-539-2980. You can find us right now. We're streaming live at KLEANradio.com. That's KLEAN with a K. You can also find us at Facebook at KLEAN Radio. Like us, please. That's KLEAN with a K. We're in the studio tonight with Jamison Monroe, founder and CEO of Newport Academy. You deal with adolescents.
We do. I do. We do at Newport Academy, 12 to 18 years old.
Why did you decide to do adolescent treatment?
Number of different reasons. One is that I was an adolescent that went to a number of treatment centers.
Right.
A number of treatment centers that weren't much more than holding cells,
right,
to be honest with you. And now you guys were referencing behavior modification. And, yeah, there was a lot of work on the behavior change, but not a whole lot of work on that deep-seated kind of interpersonal stuff that I needed a lot of help with. And so my behavior would change for a period of time. The external would change, but the internal didn't really change. So it was only a matter of time till that resurfaced and I was acting out again. But also, when you change a teenager's life, he's got so much more ahead of him, and no offense to the older guys, you still need to get sober, but, when you get sober at 50, you don't have a whole lot, more to live for. I mean, you have a whole lot more to live for.
It's getting longer and longer.
A lot of listeners out there.
You said a lot of people hung up.
I totally understand though what he's saying, but what I'm saying is that that teenager's going to have
the gentleman that founded Boys Town actually kind of gave up on late stage alcoholics and formed Boys Town to work with kids because he felt that if you could intercede younger, you had a better chance of saving more people's lives.
And you do, and that's where and on that note is that a lot of people think it's not that bad, or my kid, my 15-year-old, 16-year-old, just going through a phase. Well, the thing is that I don't know how much you guys talk about brain development on here, but we know the brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25 or 30 years old. So when you're using drugs and alcohol as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, essentially you're doing brain damage because your brain's not completely wired yet. So you're introducing a chemical, a foreign substance that's going to go in and change with the dopamine levels and the receptors, and it's only going to train the brain to default to do drugs or alcohol in order to attain any level of happiness.
Well, I think we've also seen an extension of adolescence in our culture. Most people now, like he said, my son, who's 21, not very long ago, that would have been
old age.
That would have been an adult.
Right. Yeah.
We still see 21-year-olds largely as adolescents in our culture now, which is very interesting. That and we're delaying the responsibility for one's self, being self-reliant, more and more and more. It's like it seems like the new adolescent's going to be 40 before we know it.
Well, I was talking to somebody about that the other day because the whole thing that the new 50 is the new 30, the new 14 is the new 35.
That's kind of weird, yeah.
I mean, right? If it's going to go one way, it's got to go the other way. And we were talking about, we were all with Jamison before about how How worse is it now than it was in the 60s?
Oh, it's some different figures come out, but it's 20, 30, 40 times more potent, has more THC than the plain old grass that was smoked in the 60s, and that's due to cross-pollination and,
We got to go out for a break. Judah, why don't you give us the number again so we can hopefully have some people take advantage of our wonderful call-in line.
And our hospitality. The number here is 888-539-2980, 888-539-2980. Also, you could find us at KLEANradio.com. That's Klean with a K. The discussion continues on KLEANradio.com.
Do you suspect a loved one is abusing drugs? Call Klean Treatment Center at 888-601-6040 for a free drug test and consultation. A treatment advisor is available to help you administer the test and answer any questions you may have regarding treatment and more. We are here to help. Call us today at 888-601-6040 or find us online at cleantreatmentcenter.com for your free drug test and the start of a promising future.
Now, back to Andrew and Judah.
Hey, welcome back to Klean Radio, everybody. We're having a great talk tonight. We're talking a lot about adolescent treatment and young adult treatment, and we're talking about the effects that drugs and alcohol have on development, and we're also talking about how people can get help, which I think is often a very, very difficult thing for people to do.
Well, I think also a big, I'm Judah, and the number here, by the way, you're listening to Klean Radio. The number here is 888-539-2980. That's 888-539-2980. I think a big reason is because they don't see the hope. Yeah. And, last week, Jamison, who's in our guest tonight, we have in the studio tonight, Jamison Monroe, founder and CEO of Newport Academy. He was on Jane Velez Mitchell and with with Jennifer Jimenez, who works with us at Klean. And one of the topics that came up was how the law cleared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, it always goes to the question when it's celebrity or when it's somebody famous, which I guess is a celebrity, it always goes to the messing up. Right. It never goes to the celebrity. It's like it never talks about the celebrities that are doing great in sobriety.
Yeah, isn't that funny how the positive stories don't make the front page?
Right.
Huh?
You never read about Tom Hanks living a great life. Like what did Tom Hanks do today? We went to
even
work?
Robert Downey Jr., who was the poster child of like death and destruction with addiction, and he's got he's doing so incredibly well. And
right. You don't hear the stories.
You don't hear the positive side. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, because if it bleeds, it leads. And, sadly, you only hear about addiction with celebrities, whether it be Charlie Sheen, Andy Dick, or any of these guys when they
go down in flames.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
how do people reach us on the radio station here, Judah?
The number is 888-539-2980. That's 888-539-2980.
That's right.
And they're listening to Klean Radio. That's Klean with a K.
So tell us a little bit about Newport Academy. You said you got into it because you were related to having gotten sober as an adolescent yourself.
Exactly, and I wanted to provide a center of excellence for teenagers and their families to come heal, really. So wanted to create a very small, individual-centered type program, and to that end, Newport Academy has 2 residential centers, one for males, one for females. Fully believe in a gender-specific model, especially for adolescents.
Yes.
And a lot of losses.
For liability reasons.
Yeah. Not only the overt kind of sexual distractions that come from the opposite sex during that phase of life and others as well, but are the clinical reasons is that if you get a 16-year-old young girl that's in treatment that has some sort of trauma, it's a lot easier for her to be open and honest in a group setting when it's just females than when it's a co-gender environment. So,
of course, that's still very difficult for males, even in a gender segregated environment.
Yeah, exactly. Males the same way, and I just use the female as an example, but yeah, it goes both ways, and so we're able to get a lot deeper, a lot quicker in a single gender environment.
I think that's great. I started actually, I've been in this field for 22 years, and I started an adolescent psychiatric hospital. And, I was very early in my career. And it was all behavior mod. We had a school still, and it was acute care psychiatric. So we had some very extreme cases.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like we had juvenile schizophrenia and suicide attempts that were pretty extreme. And but that being said, it was all behavior mod. There was so little put into actually really from a psychoanalytic standpoint, getting deeper into what are the underlying issues, and then also the family issues, what's going on in the home environment and how to change that.
Exactly, and that's the way most treatment centers are set up, like the one you're describing there. And so, and I saw that in the treatment centers that I was in, and the lack of family work. And so at Newport Academy, we do 30 hours of clinical work a week, and that's with a therapist or clinician. So if a kid's with us for 10 weeks, you're getting 300 hours of therapy, basically, in one treatment stay. And then families as well. Our family program is a huge tenet of our program. Families have the ability and are encouraged to participate on campus anywhere from 8 to 16 hours every single week. And so we do private individual family sessions. All day Saturday is a family day, which is a combination of education and multifamily process groups. And then we also have a couple intensive periods where we'll have like a family come in for one whole day, just one family, and work with that family on a number of different process groups and things like that.
A lot of people of our generation is, parents who have children now that are 12 to 18, tend to feel somewhat ambivalent about how they should view drug and alcohol use, especially I think marijuana and alcohol.
Because they did it.
Because they did a lot of it themselves. Right. And most people do grow out of even binge drinking or the use of marijuana.
Right.
So how does a parent know when, it's not okay, and when it is okay? Is it ever okay? Yeah. What's your view on that? I mean, you run a treatment center, so I don't know if your view is really extreme or
it's not really extreme at all. Yeah. I mean, I'm into individual choices, honestly. Right. And so I tell parents, first of all, parents like my kid smoking pot. Well, first of all, they have to decide whether or not they want to allow their kid to smoke pot or not. And if they don't, then we can talk about ways that they could prevent their kid from doing so, and at least monitor their kid and make sure they don't, and set up consequences and boundaries and things like that. But one thing that you really want to look at is that age of first use. So there's a lot of studies done around the age of first use, and all the data heavily shows that the earlier someone starts using drugs or alcohol, the more likely they are to develop serious abuse issues, substance abuse issues. And so if a kid uses before the age of 14, the brain development is in a place to where they're highly likely, almost 90% in some cases, develop a substance abuse problem. Whereas if they wait till they're 18, that number goes way down because the brain's developed so much more. If they wait till after 21, then there's there's a slim to none chance that they're going to develop an addiction. So,
besides the fact that both of these drugs are illegal, alcohol and marijuana, do you think that there's any healthy level of alcohol and marijuana intake for an adolescent?
Healthy? I don't think there's any healthy, but I think that, I know plenty of people that I drank with in high school that are perfectly fine today and doing really well. So, when you look at addiction, it's continued use despite negative consequences. So if you start seeing grades falling, if you start seeing relationships being broken, acting out in other ways, then you want to take a look at it. And then it's pretty interesting because we get calls from parents all the time, and they call us, but they're talking about all these other things that are going on. And a lot of times they have troubles connecting the dot to the fact that, well, their kid's smoking pot every day and drinking 4 or 5 days a week, and the other consequences are stemming from that. And so if we can get kids sober, it's amazing how they start turning around and make good grades and make straight A's and graduate high school.
But I think you're right, though. I think it's the generational thing. I'm 35. I don't know how old you are.
31.
31. Andrew's 52.
Yeah,
and I'm just joking. And but you have a lot of parents of the next generation that have a lot of tattoos.
Yeah.
That have used drugs themselves, and they don't anymore. They're not they're not drug addicts. But how do you tell a kid when you have a tramp stamp on your back? How do you tell your daughter that's 14 not to get a tramp stamp, and that you only got it because it was a bad mistake, not because you were actually a tramp? And there's a lot of that guilt Or a lot of, I don't know if it's parents want to be
well,
friends.
you don't want to be hypocritical,
Right.
and I think it's tough. I think it's tough to, set an example if you might have made some mistakes yourself.
Right.
Hopefully, people can have open and honest discussions with, their family members.
Yeah, you're
And-
exactly right. I mean,
yeah.
that's the best thing is that the average age of first use of kids these days is about 12 and a half years old. And so really we tell parents to start talking to their kids when they're 9 and 10 years old. When they're finishing up elementary school, 5th, 6th grade, that's when you really need to start having open, honest conversations around the dinner table because kids are hearing about it at school. There's kids using at school.
And the secondary, I mean, like
Mm.
I know, just from speaking personal experience, I started drinking and using drugs because it got you in the cool group that was having sex.
Same, yeah.
I mean,
Thank God not in my school because it was all boys. But
That you know of.
but that's I
that's
think
true.
I think that the secondary issues that are associated with alcohol and drugs, exposure to HIV, herpes, other STDs, just getting pregnant, the good old problems, right? That we seem to have forgotten.
You're listening to KLEAN Radio Live, by the way. The number here is 888-539-2980. That's 888-539-2980. Give us a call. These are really cool things actually to talk about because I don't think they are being spoken about. Is the dangers of marijuana, and and we're not talking about reefer madness dangers. We're talking about that there are 11 and 12-year-old kids right now in elementary schools and high schools smoking up.
Yeah, and it's so much stronger. Let's take a call. We got a call, Michael from Lemon Grove. Michael, welcome to KLEAN Radio.
Yeah. I basically have a friend that has these classic symptoms you guys were talking about. Now, I have been working with him for, I would say, a little over a year. And I think part of the question of what you guys are trying to get to is what do you do or how do you handle people of that age bracket or younger than the friend that I have that are possibly using drugs? Well, I guess it's got to come from the person. If he or she wants to get off of that kind of stuff, they will. Like my friend, for instance, he smokes pot, but he does it medically. Now, I don't know if that's something that you guys believe in or not, but ever since
Well, how old are they?
How old is he?
The one that does it medically.
He was 19, now he's 20.
And what exactly is his medical condition that he's smoking marijuana for?
He has problems like he can't really concentrate and he can't really sleep because of insomnia and that
Those are generally caused by marijuana.
Those are right. It's right.
Well, exactly. Since I've been working with him, he has stopped using DXM, which is basically cough syrup. He doesn't do, I think it was probably crystal meth and probably some other kind of drug.
Right.
And he has stopped smoking. So the only thing he's doing at this moment is the weed.
Well, I think that there's a thing called in the industry and in the rooms of AA and in the addiction community called marijuana maintenance, where people seem to think that if you can limit your drug to marijuana, that it's okay. Certainly, I would rather see someone probably smoking marijuana than smoking crystal meth. But
like I was saying to my sister, ever since I've been working with him, he has been clean now for about 130 days.
You mean from everything?
Except for marijuana.
Excuse me?
Except for marijuana.
Except for marijuana,
Right.
Yes. But I know, all things considered, I would say this is a pretty good victory on my behalf because the marijuana isn't anything of which I think it comes any close to like the other drugs of which he was dealing in.
Well, I think you're right to some extent. I think that absolutely it's better to be smoking pot than crystal meth. But there's a few things that I think you need to know that are very important. One is that the brain centers that are activated by crystal meth are also activated by marijuana on a much lesser scale. So in a way, what you're doing is what's called harm reduction. And it's a belief system from the public health model that says that try to substitute less of a harmful substance or a substance that just maintains someone at a level that's less damaging than if they were not to use that, and then use a different substance that was more damaging. So by default, you've actually come upon a way of treatment that really is very controversial. It's used a lot in Europe, and for some people it works. My biggest concern is that marijuana has become so much more potent of a drug than it used to be, and then also you're setting up and forming neural pathways in the brain where the chances of him being triggered and relapsing and having a problem with harder drugs again continues to exist, and there isn't an improvement in his brain chemistry. If you could get him to stop using marijuana as well, the odds of him relapsing back onto crystal meth are dramatically decreased, as well as any potential long-term damage that may be occurring or being reinforced by the medical marijuana.
Jamison, what do you got for him?
I agree with what Andrew said. It's a marijuana maintenance program, and I'd like to know, are there any negative consequences from the marijuana maintenance program? Is our caller still on there?
Yeah. Michael?
Yes.
Are you still seeing problems? Are there other problems that are still occurring?
The problems from the marijuana or the problems from the other things?
No, are there problems from him
in general?
Smoking? Yeah.
In general, what issues are going on?
In general, it seems like, right now he's on what you might call a 2 to 3 week break from the marijuana, so he's not doing anything at the moment.
Well, that's good.
That's great.
How's that going?
It goes fine. It goes really well, as a matter of fact. It's just that I am working on getting him to stop marijuana as well. But right now, I'm like picking my battles, because a person that is was using the amount of drugs that he was on and using, you have to, I guess, slowly ease a person into how you want them to be. And if that person's willing to work with you, then you got something to work with.
I think I have a couple of suggestions. One is that, when that 2 to 3 week set period of taking a break is up, let's, do another 2 to 3 weeks and see how you feel after that, and then another 2 weeks after that. And, that's definitely a way of easing into it. But also, I'd encourage you to go to meetings, or encourage him to go to meetings, and you can go with him too to take him to some support, because typically.
I was suggesting that to him, and because he does go to this one place to help him with his so-called quote-unquote problem, and it's all like psychological and all this kind of stuff. And he has offered me to sit in on sessions with him. So I said, well, I might just do that, because it's like whatever it is that's going to take him from going from using marijuana or using other harsher drugs or what have you, and totally and completely stop would be the ultimate goal.
Right. Well, typically when you're using those crystal meth and the marijuana and all the other drugs that you were talking about, your friends are too, right? Your peers are doing the same thing. So when you quit, you either hang out with the guys that are still using drugs, or you have no friends. So for me, a big part in what we tell all our young people is like a big part of AA. The kids that don't want to go AA, it's like, well, who are your friends now?
Right.
You don't
need
really have
a fellowship.
Right. Yeah, a big part of the 12-step meetings is the fellowship and developing a support group of other people that are getting and staying sober.
Michael, we're going to have to move on to another call, but I just lastly would suggest that I think it's really important that you take him to see a physician. You mentioned some other problems that he was having, insomnia, some other things. There might be some underlying medical issues as well. I always encourage a good general physical as well, and just check that up. And if you continue to have problems, or if he gets back on meth or starts using something that has caused some real damages, definitely seek out a treatment professional. And KleanCenter.com, if anybody can call us from the number there, and if we can't help you, we'll find someone that can. So
all right, sounds good.
Best of luck, Michael.
Yeah.
Really appreciate the call. Let's go to our next call. We got a call from Richard. Richard, you're on KLEAN Radio?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys letting us know some of the latest things going on and where the state of treatment is today. I've been a therapist for about 30-plus years, worked with adolescents way back since the 70s, and it's so sad that, we're here where we have more than a king has ever had in terms of, discoveries and technological advances. We can't get our own human nature to stop being enslaved to these things around us, including ourselves. A lot of this stuff, insomnia is a growing epidemic. I work with young people that, maybe mainly servicemen, and it's like the insomnia is unbelievable for people. Now, some of that is work-related, but there's also so much of it because people just don't have the same kind of, natural outlets for stressors, like just hard work, and then
right. Well, we also, I hate to jump in, Richard, but, we also have a culture now that never turns off.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it
right.
used to be that you get up when the sun come up, you'd work in agriculture, and then you'd go to sleep when the sun went down, and that
And
was
if somebody
98.
called
That
you in
was
the daytime, you got back there 10 hours later.
But that was 98% of the
Now,
population's less
always
than
on.
less than 100 years ago. Nowadays, we're on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We all have these cell phones on. People play video games consistently for 3 days at a time. You know, nobody has any sort of guidelines of how to set limits for themselves generally, or how to live a healthy lifestyle. And you know, there's all this like 5-cent guru help that you hear on TV repeatedly or online, but you know, a structured lifestyle is something that takes work. And takes real commitment, and a lot of people just don't even have the guidance for that. You know, Facebook, for example, which is a relatively new phenomena, people are just coming to terms with how to deal with that. My mother was high school teacher, and then she taught college for a while, and she was at a conference just recently where she was speaking to parents, and they were just talking about they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle this type of communication. They don't know what limits to set. They don't know how their adolescents are interacting with each other, when they're interacting with each other. There's a whole new set of problems that are occurring socially about how people are sort of, flame wars, derogatory statements that are put on the internet.
Cyberbullying. Like
right. So we've got a whole new culture that's developing faster than we as treatment professionals or even as parents and individuals that we can really even know how to deal with that. And that's why I think shows like this are important.
That's affecting adults too.
It's affecting everybody.
Right,
It
like
affects the whole
Anthony
family
Weiner,
unit. Yeah, well, Anthony Weiner did it to himself.
Right, but that's a perfect example of
not even understanding how the technology exposes yourself, so to speak.
Right, and because we've
no pun intended.
we were talking about
for sure.
because we were talking about that. It took how many years to get from a horse to a car to a plane to a phone having an answering machine to where literally we can almost tap our heads and talk to each other.
It's called the exponential growth of technology.
That's a big word.
Yeah, it is. Well, the computer in your pocket, your cell phone, is 1,000 times stronger, 1,000,000 times stronger, 1,000 times smaller, and 1,000 times less expensive than the first supercomputer in 1960. Literally.
Yeah.
1,000,000 times faster, 1,000 times smaller, and 1,000 times less expensive, and that's over the course.
I'm sorry,
of 40
Richard.
years.
What was that?
We've forgotten nature. Nobody ever thought of, for example, except maybe you guys did. Let me give you an example of how people with leaders think. We've got health care coming and whatever for 30 million people. That's fine. Nobody's ever said anything about even one more doctor. In fact, we're losing 10,000 doctors a year and about 5,000 nurses. How can you do that?
The healthcare thing, which is a whole issue. I mean, we've never had healthcare reform. At best, we've had healthcare insurance modification.
Yeah. Right.
There's a lot of double speak in politics.
But we'll leave that for the politicians.
But I think that this brings up an earlier point, which is that treatment costs money.
Yeah.
Good treatment costs money, and
you get
people
what you pay for.
Right, people have cancer, and they don't think twice about spending everything they have to save their loved one from cancer, whether or not the cure works the first time or not, and they'll search desperately for the right cure. You get to issues that are about mental health, and all of a sudden there's not just addiction, but mental health in general, and there's a huge amount of fear. One of the reasons that I got into this field way back when was that I saw that people that had mental illness, issues with mental illness and with addiction, were some of the most feared and hated people around. And with a third of the homeless at the time when I started in the field being mentally ill, and now you see in the death of institutionalization with mental health hospitals and other outlets for people really getting help, and it just becoming a problem that's become criminalized. The mentally ill are now all locked up in institutions called jails and prisons.
Or at 7-Eleven.
Or outside 7-Eleven, yeah. So, we do have a society that doesn't know what to do with this problem and has had a huge fight for a long time about how to fund it and how to deal with it. And there don't seem to be many leaders out there that seem to want to take on the issue, unfortunately. I mean, I think
if Romney did or anybody did, they would find a wonderful thrust in people's interests.
Romney owns the most treatment beds in America.
Yeah, that's right.
And
actually, a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, it's true.
Bain Capital owns a company called CRC, which owns a lot of treatment beds.
Yeah, actually, I think they sold it off recently. But
Did they?
Yeah, they sold it, but they made a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And God bless, you know. I mean, it's if you're helping and all that stuff. But you know what it comes down to? We have 3 people in the studio tonight that want to help people.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have Jamison that's involved with adolescents, Andrew that's involved with, you know, people above the age of 18 and up that are trying to do their part. And I really think that's all you could do in society is, like, I think that's the hard thing about addiction. It's not like if you've survived cancer, you're going to do the cancer surgery.
Right,
well,
but it's regardless of, you know, Andrew, I know we probably think the same thing, regardless of what legislation says or what insurance says or who's paying, you know, we're going to, like you said, you got in there when it was a lot more stigmatized than it is today.
Right.
Yeah.
But we've been there before, and so we know what it feels like, and we also know that there's hope, and people do get better and get recover, and so
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the reasons that I'm in a for-profit facility is because it allows me to give out free treatment beds,
Right.
Regardless of what the government or what insurance companies tell me.
Exactly.
You know, when I started off, I worked purely with government-based Medicare programs, which was a nightmare because I couldn't do anything other than what the government would allow me to do. So it's a tough industry, and but yet, you know, I found that we've been able to do a lot of good work. So let's jump to another call. Thank you for your call, Richard. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see. We got Max from Santa Barbara. Max, how are you doing? Welcome to KLEAN Radio.
Hi, I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Good.
All right. I kind of wanted to ask you, I do smoke marijuana recreationally. I, you know, will smoke right before I go to a movie or I go on a hike or go do something outside. I wonder what your guys' opinion on that.
My opinion is that it's your own business, honestly. I'm actually, you know, surprisingly, I think most people think that most people that are in, you know, drug treatment are some sort of like teetotaling prohibitionists. The reality is that I'm actually very libertarian. I'm actually pro-legalization of drugs. I think that people as individuals have a right to do what they want. And I think that if we legalized all drugs and regulated them, we'd do a lot better as a society. In fact, all the studies show that to be true, that countries that have legalized drugs and regulated them have less amounts of addiction. Now, if you're asking me personally, do I think that you smoking marijuana is good or bad for you? I don't know. I don't know you well enough to know.
No, I meant like you're like an opinion on it, like a large view.
Well, let me ask you a question. It's, you know, you're the one that's asking the question. You're the only person that could give the answer. And why are you asking the question is what you have to ask yourself. Because if it wasn't bothering you, you might not be asking the question. It's like when somebody says, do I look fat? You're probably feeling fat. And yeah, you probably look fat. And I hate to be brutally honest like that, but that's usually the case.
Oh, no, it's totally fine. All right. That was I mean, I like the view of how, you know, to legalize how it would look when you did the whole thing in a large perspective. All right. That's all I actually had to ask.
Cool, Max.
Great.
Well, look, you know, and you know, I would encourage you to educate yourself as much as possible. I love the fact that people that don't have drug problems necessarily, but are recreational drug users, are listening and have an open mind and are willing to listen to what we have to say. I think that, you know, you'll probably run into friends that can't hold that boundary maybe as well as you can, and it's important for you to understand what that boundary is and how to maybe help somebody that can't manage drug use as well as you can.
Oh, no, I mean, I totally know people who, I mean, I live in California. I used to be from LA.
Right, that's all you have to say.
Right.
You live in California.
And Santa Barbara.
Max, we're running out of time. I hate to cut you off, but thank you so much for calling KLEAN Radio. I really appreciate the call.
All right, take care, good gentlemen.
Thank you. You're listening to KLEAN Radio. You can find us on Facebook at KLEAN Radio or at KLEANradio.com and find all our past shows. Let's thank Jamison Monroe, founder and CEO of Newport Academy, for coming in tonight.
It's a pleasure.
How do people find Newport Academy?
Newport-academy.com, Newport-academy.com, or just type Newport Academy into Google and we'll pop up.
Sounds great.
And
thank you so much for coming in. Judah, my lovely and wonderful and talented co-host, thank you for another great show.
Oh, I'm excited the Giants won.
I know. I can't believe it, and too bad the Saints didn't get an opportunity to kill them. But
and the discussion and the discussion continues on KLEANradio.com.
Thanks for listening to KLEAN Radio. You can tap into KLEAN Radio 24/7 at KLEANradio.com, featuring a live video stream of the show, the best of KLEAN Radio, and even watch Andrew's appearance on Dr. Drew's Life Changers.
Do you suspect a loved one is abusing drugs? Call KLEAN Treatment Center at 888-601-6040 for a free drug test and consultation. A treatment advisor is available to help you administer the test and answer any questions you may have regarding treatment and more. We are here to help. Call us today at 888-601-6040 or find us online at cleantreatmentcenter.com for your free drug test and the start of a promising future.